Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us here today overlooking the impressive North Saskatchewan River Valley. I'm pleased to be here today to share details on steps the Alberta government is taking to protect the quality of our water. The North Saskatchewan River is a critical natural resource for our province. It serves a number of communities, big and small, between its headwaters and Banff National Park and the Alberta-Saskatchewan border and beyond. Its clean and reliable flows are the source of drinking water for well over 1 million Albertans. The North Saskatchewan also offers a healthy aquatic ecosystem that is home to more than 25 fish species, which is almost half of all of the native fish species in Alberta. It has tremendous recreation value, whether paddling downstream, casting a line from the shore, or exploring the many scenic trails that run along its banks. That's why it's so important that we ensure these waters are protected. Over the past 20 years, Alberta's population grew by more than 1 million, and the size of our economy expanded in lockstep as more and more people decided to call our province home. This is positive, but it can also present some challenges. Specifically, it has led to an increased pressure and need to access a valuable and limited resource, our water. Alberta's growth has led to an important question. How do we make sure clean, high-quality water is available to support healthy communities and a strong economy? This question has been addressed in other areas of our province through surface water quality management frameworks. All proposed resource developments is subject to stringent review within our regulatory framework to ensure it is safe, environmentally responsible, and meets all requirements. The protection of our lands and waters remains of critical importance as we develop our natural resources. Comprehensive land use planning supports conservation and environmental protection efforts, while ensuring our tourism, agriculture, energy, and forestry sectors can be developed in a sustainable way. Surface water quality management frameworks are one component of a larger regulatory system that manages development activity to ensure water quality is protected. There are two comprehensive regional surface water quality management frameworks already in place in Alberta. In southern Alberta, the South Saskatchewan Region Surface Water Quality Management Framework is effectively protecting water quality in the Bow, Oldman, South Saskatchewan, and Milk Rivers. A similar framework is in place for northeastern Alberta. Since 2012, the Lower Athabasca Surface Water Quality Management Framework has helped environment parks effectively manage cumulative impacts to water quality in an area with a heavy concentration of industrial activity. Surface water quality management frameworks are effective because they establish clear regional objectives for water quality. These objectives are set in collaboration with stakeholders, Indigenous communities, municipalities, and the public to ensure they can reliably support water needs for the community, aquatic habitat, and the economy in the region into the future. Regular water monitoring, evaluation, and reporting on ambient surface water quality conditions ensures the objectives of the frameworks are being met. I want to highlight that under these frameworks, once water quality objectives are set, they must be achieved. This means if any water quality trigger or limit is exceeded, the framework will require a management response from government. This level of oversight helps us better understand the cumulative effects of various activities on the landscape, which is essential to making informed decisions in the future about land and water management and resource development. Southern Alberta and northeastern Alberta each have their own unique water challenges. But as Alberta continues to grow, water resources in other parts of the province, including the North Saskatchewan and Upper Athabasca regions, are starting to come under similar pressures. Today, I'm pleased to announce that the Alberta government is launching public and Indigenous engagement on two new surface water quality frameworks. The North Saskatchewan framework will include the entire lengths of the North Saskatchewan and Battle Rivers, while the Upper Athabasca framework will cover the Athabasca River from the headwaters in Jasper National Park right through to Athabasca County. Input from Albertans and Indigenous peoples will help define the water quality objectives for these frameworks and help ensure they address the concerns raised by Alberta about water quality issues related to industrial development, including those received through the coal policy engagement. Public and Indigenous engagement on both surface water quality management frameworks launched today and will run until September 17th. Albertans have always placed a high priority on the quality of our water, and I encourage all interested Albertans to provide their feedback through the online survey or register for one of the webinars scheduled for early July. Details can be found within the engagement section of alberta.ca. We have also heard from Albertans regarding the concerns about selenium and their expectations of industry to meet the highest water quality standards throughout a project's life cycle. While surface water quality management frameworks take a regional, long-term view of protecting our water, we also understand there are local, site-specific concerns regarding water quality and in particular selenium. This is why Environment Parks will also undertake a selenium management review in collaboration with the Alberta Energy Regulator. The review will look at Alberta's current approach and regulatory requirements for the application, construction, operation, decommissioning, and reclamation of mines, with the aim to identify any findings that could pose a threat to water quality. This review will also look at management approaches and relevant policy tools in comparable jurisdictions to understand their purpose and possible application in Alberta. Once the review is complete, we will work with impacted groups on the necessary actions required to protect the quality of our water. I'd also like to address the McLeod River report, recently finalized by the government and released today as part of this announcement. The purpose of the McLeod report was to analyze long-term trends in water quality data to help inform the development of surface water quality management frameworks. The 3 former coal mines mentioned in this report are no longer active and are in either the decommissioning or reclamation phase. However, the water quality data in this report will help inform the North Saskatchewan and Upper Athabasca surface water quality management frameworks that will be developed with the input from Albertans and Indigenous communities. The responsible management of our water resources has long been a priority for Alberta. This is reflected in the key pillars of Alberta's Water for Life strategy, which was first released in 2003. In the coming days, the Alberta Water Council will release its report on the implementation of the Water for Life strategy, and I look forward to receiving this review and working with Alberta's water stakeholders on the next steps. This report will outline the progress Alberta has made on achieving the strategy's 3 main goals of ensuring a safe, secure drinking water supply, a healthy aquatic ecosystem, and reliable quality water supplies for a thriving economy. Public and Indigenous engagement on new surface water quality management frameworks for the North Saskatchewan and the Upper Athabasca regions and our up-and-coming selenium management review both strongly align with these goals and the priorities of Albertans. Effectively managing our water resources requires thought, commitment, and the active participation of Indigenous communities, interested Albertans, and other stakeholders. I'm pleased that we have many important groups supporting this initiative that include the Alberta Conservation Association, the Alberta Industrial Heartland Association, the Northeast Capital Industrial Association, the Rural Municipalities of Alberta, Athabasca's Watershed Council, the Bow River Basin Council, and Ducks Unlimited Canada. I look forward to receiving the feedback from Albertans and Indigenous peoples on the draft surface water quality management frameworks and continuing the government's work to meet Alberta's expectations regarding the management of our water resources. Thank you again for joining me in such a beautiful location today. And with that, I'd be happy to take some questions.
Thank you, Minister. We will have 2 questions, starting with 2 on site and then 2 on the phone. Go ahead.
Hi, Minister. Audrey Navarre from French CBC.
It is already in place from my department. You saw it just this last week as the Joint Regulatory Review Panel made their decision in regards to Grassy, where they refer significantly to the fact that one of the reasons that they decided that project cannot go forward is because of concerns about the inability to be able to manage selenium, or that those questions were not answered. That is based on the policies that are already placed inside Alberta Environment. We have an ongoing process on how we manage selenium and other impacts to our waterways. This is the next evolution of that process. We got to go through a process to be able to collect data to determine what we're trying to work on. That report from that data was provided to me early in the new year, at which point I challenged the department to come back with the next steps. This is the next steps. So we to be very clear, we continue to manage selenium, but we understand that our province can and continue to do better. And this is the next step along the way for Alberta Environment. I will also point out, for the areas where coal is primarily being spoken about at the moment, water quality frameworks are already in place in the southern portion of our province, but it's time for that work to take place in the North Saskatchewan and the Upper Athabasca.
And can you give us an idea of what potential further steps the province could take to manage selenium, without saying that you're going to do it, but what are the possibilities that could be explored here?
Well, what's important about this process is that it's not my job to figure out how we can manage selenium. What we need to do is identify the problem. We can use the data that we've received through the scientific research and then have a conversation about what can or cannot take place because of selenium. The impacts of selenium on the waterway being studied will determine what needs to be discussed, but ultimately through that consultation process, those questions will be fleshed out on what type of things are available to be able to manage this issue. And frankly, as you saw down south, with the Grassy decision, the regulator will often make decisions, rightly so, based on the policy coming from Alberta Environment, that a project can't go forward because simply the answer may be that we can't do anything about it, and that's why we should not be putting it inside our waters.
Next question.
As you guys review the coal policy on the eastern slopes there, how will that be tied to this selenium framework review? Will you await the results of this review before moving forward on?
Well, the coal policy, and I think it's good to have a reminder on this, that while water is an important conversation when it comes to coal, which is why we're trying to have it through this process, the 1976 coal policy didn't refer to water and has no connection to the water legislation in our province. And so how this will connect with the overall coal consultation process is what they're hearing on water will now have a place that can be reviewed, the information that they're receiving from Albertans and from stakeholders when it comes to water, and then we can pump that into our process as the managers of water inside the province to make changes. I think that when both of these processes are complete, they will both end up as part of land use planning for different regions. The work Minister Savage is doing as the Minister of Energy, and the work that we're doing on water, and that's ultimately where they'll end up together. So I guess, Tom, what I'm saying is this provides an avenue for Albertans who are participating in the coal consultation process to actually engage with the department that's involved and in charge of water.
It's not unfair to say trust with a lot of landowners in that area is broken with the government because of what happened with the decision last summer and last spring. What is your government going to do to try and reestablish that trust? How important is it to get this right? Well,
one of the things that I talked about last spring, to be very, very clear, there was only one coal project that was asking for approval inside this province. It started underneath the former government in 2015. And my message to landowners in the south has been to trust the regulatory process. We have the strongest water regulations in the world here inside this province. And you saw it with the Joint Review Panel's decision on Grassy yesterday. They refer specifically to those policies as why they can't approve that mine. Where some of the confusion comes in is some people think that it's the government or cabinet that would determine whether or not a mine would be approved. That's not how our system is designed. We have a strong regulatory system, and I would submit again to you, Tom. Last week shows that it's working, and that those rules are in place, and that we can trust our regulator to do the important work that they do down south. So hopefully, some of the stuff that's taken place over the last week will restore some of the trust inside our robust regulatory system.
We will now go to a call from the phones. Operator, can you put through the first caller, please?
First is Janet French with CBC. Go ahead, Janet.
Hi there. Thanks for taking my question. So funding has been cut, though, for water quality monitoring in Alberta. So how are you going to enact these wider frameworks, consultation, and be ready to, have action plans to respond when contaminant levels exceed guidelines or limits if there's less money for monitoring and acting upon this data?
Well, funding has not been cut for water monitoring. Again, environmental monitoring budget within Alberta Environment Parks has stayed stable between $20 and $22 million roughly, and there has been no significant change to that. I do know there's rumors going around that there's been large cuts to water monitoring, but that in fact is not true. We continue to have over 100 and some water monitoring stations across the province. Some of those stations remain in permanent locations to provide baselines as well as other information that we need for managing our rivers. Other locations move when we're managing specific projects or looking for certain information. The McLeod River, for example, would have had monitoring stations in as they collected the data for this report, and some of those stations will now move into other rivers where we need to collect data from. But to be clear, environmental monitoring has remained stable in Alberta Environment and Parks budget, varying by about $1 million a year and sitting at about just north of $20 million.
Follow-up question? Hearing none, we'll go back to...
follow-up question, Janet?
No, just about the timeline for the Selenium review. I don't think that was articulated.
The timeline will be that they will report back in this fall as they go through this process. And again, that will take place with both Alberta Environment Parks and in partnership with the Alberta Energy Regulator.
Okay, we'll go back to a question from the floor here.
Taria here from CTV. Hi, Minister. You'd said that the framework will trigger a management response. Can you elaborate as to what management response means?
So it would, once we decide levels and the framework for, within that water quality management framework, so it would be in place, if you start to see it go above the monitoring level of those limits, it would require the Alberta government to take action. Now, depending on what the chemical or what was in the river, what industry may be involved, would require different types of action. But the government would have to come forward with an action plan to be able to deal with that. That may be working with the industry that has maybe been causing that number to go up and requiring them to deal with it. It may be adjusting policy to make sure that certain activities couldn't take place on a watershed. It also could be stuff that you've already seen taking place in the South Saskatchewan, where us and the federal government are doing work on species at risk, particularly the West Slope cutthroat, which is an endangered species in the southern portion of our province, where we had to come together through the Alberta Wildlife Act and the Federal Species at Risk Act to make a plan to be able to deal with that species and its impact. So it really depends on what is coming back from that process. The point is, though, is that by making a framework, it requires government to take action when limits have been exceeded.
And then as far as public engagement goes, can you elaborate? You mentioned webinars, but will you be meeting with people? Will there be town halls? What can people who will be affected expect?
So we will certainly be doing a variety of techniques. And again, I want to refer everybody to alberta.ca as the first place to start. Consultation open today. And I encourage interested Albertans to register there either for webinars or to provide their feedback through that avenue. The department will also be meeting with, is already, but will continue to be meeting with stakeholders all across the province when it comes to the water, particularly in these two watersheds where we're working on the new regional frameworks. And I will continue to work closely with stakeholders who I meet with on a regular basis when it comes to water. We see this as very important to get their feedback to be able to make sure we get this right. And then lastly, we do know that the coal engagement is hearing concerns and thoughts about water, and we will be working closely with them to make sure that we can get that feedback and information that they're getting through that process into my department, which is the department that can take action on this issue.
We got time for a couple more.
Is there any money for the review and also the framework for the rivers? Is there any money attached to that?
So we can manage this within the current Alberta Environment and Parks budget, and so that this is the next step along the way of the ongoing water monitoring and policy work that we do within Alberta Environment and Parks. So yes, there is money, but it's not an add-on to Alberta Environment and Parks budget. We're able to accommodate that within my current budget.
Thank you, Minister.
Awesome, thanks guys.